Just consider Speaker Johnson's state and district. Just look at the murder rate. That's nearly 4 times higher than California's in Louisiana.
Have at it.
Again, Gavin Newsom will do anything for attention. He can name drop me all he wants. He needs to go and govern his state and not be engaging in all of this. Look, we have crime in cities all across America, and we're against that everywhere, and we need to bring policies to bear. My hometown of Shreveport has done a great job of reducing crime gradually, but we've got to address it everywhere that it rears its ugly head. And I think every major city in the country, the residents of those cities are open to that and anxious to have it.
So there's a lot of lies there, that little evasion by Mike Johnson. First of all, LA didn't want the National Guard there. That was very clear. The people didn't want that. In DC, the polls are clear. 80 to 90% of the population don't want the National Guard there. He doesn't care at all what people actually want. And it's ironic that he's like, Gavin Newsom, he just wants attention by pointing out crime rates or whatever. Well, you guys are doing that. He's doing the same thing you're doing, except he's just accurately pointing out where the crime actually is. And it seems like it's in your backyard, Mike Johnson. Why aren't you worried about that? Because again, what Gavin Newsom is doing is inconveniently blowing up a narrative. And the discussion that they want isn't about crime and how to deal with it. If you wanted to do that, you'd find where the crime actually was rather than just pointing to blue cities. And you'd solve it in a way that makes sense rather than just temporarily stationing the Marines there. No, this is about the president wanting this pretext. He wants to look strong, he wants to look assertive, and he wants to do it in areas where he's crushing blue cities. When you point out that Shreveport has a bunch of crime, or as I'm gonna do later in this segment, that it's red states where the crime actually is, he doesn't care about that. And he's going to evade. So we're gonna go to one more clip because now this is a pattern where Mike Johnson is being asked about this. And oh boy, he's dancing, he's coming up with cover stories or whatever and doesn't want to deal with the fact that the crime is in his backyard. Take a look.
I was gonna ask when you might be calling for the National Guard in Shreveport, which is, you have part of your district is Shreveport. The FBI statistics, actually violent crime per 100,000 residents higher in Shreveport last year than Washington, D.C.
There's a lot of good work that's been done. There's a lot of reasons for that, but we have a Democrat DA there who has not been prosecuting crime as some other more aggressive DAs have around the country. Soros funded that individual to be elected. But I'll say that it's an urban area that has a lot of problems that are happening around the country, and we have to address it.
So would the Guard help? If the Guard can help in D.C., the president has said he wants to send the Guard to Chicago and other places. Why not Shreveport?
I don't know. That's not my call.
Would you ask him
necessary?
For that?
Well, I don't know. Let's take one city at a time and see. We have to address the crime problem in any city where it's a problem like that. And in large cities like in Chicago, as you mentioned, that would be a big help there.
So there's a lot there that I think is very funny. So first of all, it is never gonna be the Republicans' fault, okay? So in blue cities, if there's a blue mayor or a blue governor, Democrat governor, then it's their fault. In their areas, we have a DA, I guess, or they were funded by a Jewish billionaire or whatever. There's always some other evasion to a Democrat. And he says there, so let's do it one city at a time. And the way I've ordered it, it's all the blue ones. Eventually, maybe we'll get to Shreveport or whatever, but like, come on, there's Detroit. We gotta do Detroit, we gotta do Manhattan or whatever. Even though, again, the crime is worse in Shreveport than it is in DC. And so when you do not engage with the truth in these stats, it's just gaslighting. That's all they're doing is gaslighting us about crime to pursue a political narrative. A goal an ideological goal that they have that has nothing to do with crime. And the final thing I'll say, and then I'll throw it to you, Elliot, pointing out that the crime is worse in his area, or I'm gonna tell you how it is state by state or whatever. Like, I want to be very clear. I don't want the National Guard in Shreveport. I don't want the National Guard in Louisiana. I don't want it in any of these places. So understand this is sort of like a rhetorical tool or whatever, but like the equality in this is not gonna be that America feels conquered everywhere you go. It's to point out that the pretext for the deployment of the National Guard is absolute BS, and Mike Johnson knows it. Elliot, what do you think?
Yeah, I think I'm starting to wonder if Mike Johnson had his jaw like wired shut just to so he could make it easier for all the BS to come out. I do think that my family is from Florida, and I know a lot of people on the right who their entire perception of these blue cities is filtered through right-wing media. So their understanding of Los Angeles or Detroit or Chicago or whatever is a caricature of what it is. And so I think use the word political. That's exactly what it is. And if they can show or create this narrative that these cities in particular are out of control, I think it galvanizes people politically, but it also really, I think it's psychologically really detrimental to a lot of this population in this country because we're already divided enough. And all it's doing is creating this complete mythical binary that doesn't really exist. So it's frustrating to watch, and it's also so predictable. You can go, as you're saying, by the state, go, oh yeah, just imagine that someone who's never been to any of these cities is watching this and what they're going to think about it and what that's going to lead them to do when it comes time to vote. So that's my take on it.
Yeah, I don't know. And look, when you look at the polling, I think we're basically evenly split on whether, and again, which is terrible, that should the military conquer, some part of America that most of the respondents have never been to, don't know anything about, they get their propaganda or whatever. But then when you ask them, should your area become, they're like, no, crime's improving. Everybody thinks crime is terrible, but where I live is getting better. In the same way that they think Congress is terrible, but my congressman is pretty good. It's because they don't know and they haven't been there. And that's why it's so disgusting when the Republicans gaslight them in the way that they do. Mike Johnson said there, Shreveport's rough, but they've been making some progress. Okay, but that's literally what we've been saying about DC and Chicago and all these areas. So why is it that it's true for Shreveport and back up off of Shreveport because we've been making progress, but when crime is down 30% in these blue cities, it's utterly irrelevant. And you know what? You even pointing that out is so disrespectful to the people of those cities. I feel like he's being disrespectful to Shreveport then in that case. And understand that this is not just about DC. No, they are moving on to the next city. Trump back to back, Chicago, it's the murder capital of the world, and all these people have been shot. We gotta conquer it, we gotta crush it beneath our boots. Now, is there crime in Chicago? Yes, there's crime in Chicago. It is a very big city, and I don't know if you know this, but people are being absolutely annihilated economically. If you actually wanted to lower crime rates, you wouldn't screw people over economically and make them constantly ever more desperate than they were. But that said, despite that, there has been, as we have heard of Shreveport, a lot of improvement. And in fact, murders are down more than 30% compared to just last year. Shootings have fallen almost 40%, and both are on pace to be among the lowest levels the city has seen in more than a decade. Now, there are still more than 1,200 people likely being shot. Nearly 300 murders, which is a lot, and it's disproportionate compared to places like New York City and LA, which will be, I guess, invaded for other reasons since they're not as bad in terms of crime as that. But that's what they want to focus on. Again, Chicago's crime rate can be lower than all of these vast swaths of America or whatever, but it's convenient to crush it. It's convenient to conquer that place. And so when I point out that the southern states of Louisiana, Tennessee, Alabama, Arkansas, and South Carolina were among the national leaders in both violent crime and homicide rates last year, I am saying irrelevant things, okay? All had violent crime and homicide rates above the national average. You'll notice the tanks are not being dispatched to bring them to bear. Alaska, by the way, has the nation's highest violent crime rate. Have you literally even heard anything about Alaska and all this? Why is Alaska not being bombed by the Marines right now, okay? Their violent crime rate, their violent crime rate is 1,194 per 100,000 red, 3 times the national average, okay? Way above DC's homicide rate, by the way. By the way, if you look at it, DC's homicide rate is 11th. Okay, Jackson, Mississippi is higher, and yet it's not being conquered. And even more ironically, many of the states that are dispatching their National Guard to DC, so Texas, Ohio, Missouri, Tennessee, they all have higher crime rates than DC. And yet they've taken their soldiers, which are the only thing that can solve these crime rates, and they sent them to DC where crime is less of a problem. And so again, none of this has anything to do with crime. This is all propaganda and gaslighting. And we're gonna turn to one more aspect of it, but Elliot, I wanna give you a chance to weigh in.
Yeah, it's 100% propaganda. And it also is a really clever kind of propaganda because, like many things, I think when the right wing media ecosphere kicks into high gear, they create problems where when you present these facts like you're doing, it gives this impression that, like, oh, well, they just are okay with crime, or they love crime, or look at these, defending all of these crimes. It's like, no, we're just pointing out the reality of the situation and going, look, if you want to actually take care of crime, look where the crime is, and maybe start there first. Don't start at all, really, but maybe invest in those places economically so that people don't feel strapped and they're not driven to do things that where they end up arrested. So,
yeah, exactly. And like, so are the Democrats just never supposed to like acknowledge if a thing is improving because that's disrespectful?
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Trump invents improvement. They're not even real. He's talking about, I got gas down 50%. No, you didn't. No, you did. But let's pretend that you did. It's really disrespectful considering how much regular people still have to pay for gas. Like, so what everybody was saying, including us, Joe Biden should have done a better job of telling the story of the improvement that happened in the US during his term. Or maybe he shouldn't have, because if he said that things were improving using literal, like verified facts, you're not supposed to do that. Only the fascists get to do that. That's so strange, so bizarre. Again, and pointing out a true improvement is not saying that it's good enough and we don't have to do more. We literally just did that with Chicago. I pointed out how it's improved and also pointed out how it's still too high. Can you not do both? Are we so like allergic to nuance that we can't do that? Or can't point out that perhaps if we're gonna have a discussion about how we improve things, military might is not the only way. That's not actually how you get down crime rates in a lingering way.